love it. It's really loud. If everybody would start to make their way to their seats, we will begin in a couple of minutes as soon as everyone's in their seats. Please feel free to bring your drinks, your food, anything you wish to your seats with you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Pearson. I work for the El Paso Community Foundation, and I would like to welcome you to this wonderful event for a wonderful man, a wonderful writer. Can I say wonderful a couple of times? And really the person who, for all of us, has unlocked the secrets of the universe, right? I got a call a few weeks ago from Dennis O'Hearn, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at UTEP, and he said, hey, we want to do something really nice for Benjamin Signs. Have you ever met the guy? And I said, oh my gosh. Ben and I, when I was a young man, we used to walk the Arroyo Park near Kern Place, and I would run into him, and he was always walking a dog. And we started having conversations, and that was my first thing. And I'm like, oh, this guy's a writer. Oh, pretty good. That's pretty neat. Yeah. And then I came to work at the Community Foundation, and he would say, oh, you know, we're doing this thing for the creative writing department. Can we use your room? Can we do this? And, oh, yeah, this guy, he's kind of a big deal. And I became ill. And it was right about the time everything started and stopped at the Kentucky Club. It begins and ends, I'm sorry. And I was in the hospital, and my wife, Julie, who is here, read me some of those essays. And we had a reading here in this foundation room for that when he won the PEN/Faulkner Award. And I have to say I was a little distracted, and I didn't get all of the story. What I found was that Julie, this is about Ben, so I'll be quiet. But Julie reading me those stories helped me get away from the distraction of someone sticking a needle in my back and telling me it's going to get worse before it gets better. And so I was so sorry to have missed that event, but I'm so glad to be here for this one. And this one is important because, you know, now, oh, he's a writer. Oh, he's kind of a big deal. This guy, I think, is bona fide. I'm going to speak for him, but I'm not going to speak too much. I want to really pass it on to Dennis O'Hearn, whose idea this was, and just welcome you all here and say thank you for attending and thank you for paying tribute to a wonderful person, a good human being, and a pretty good writer.
Thanks, Eric. Let's see. Not quite so tall. Before we get started, I just want to read something brief. This began as the policy of the College of Liberal Arts. It is now the policy of the University of Texas at El Paso. As members of the University of Texas at El Paso community, we acknowledge that we're meeting on unceded indigenous land. We would like to recognize and pay our respects to the indigenous people with long ties to the immediate region. Lipan Apache, Mescalero Apache, Piro Manso Suma Humano, Isleta del Sur Pueblo, Piro Manso Tiwa, Indian tribe of the Pueblo of San Juan de Guadalupe, and Tortugas Pueblo. We also acknowledge the nations whose territories include present-day Texas, the Carrizo, Comecrudo, Coahualtecan, Caddo, Tonkawa, Comanche, Alabama, Coshata, Kickapoo, and the peoples of Chihuahua and northern Mexico, from whom many and most of our students descend, such as the Raramuri, Tepehuan, Huixarica, and Nahuatlaca peoples. Finally, we recognize all of the American Indian and indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories here in Paso del Norte. The University of Texas at El Paso honors your history and cultures, and we seek greater awareness of the myriad ways in which your legacy can guide us in fruitful partnerships and mutually fulfilling relationships. Thank you. Bienvenidos, buenas tardes. I'd like to say a few words about the conception of this event. Eric has already primed the pump a little bit, but we'll follow up on that. As many of you know, and some of you don't know, I will soon be stepping down as Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at UTEP. That happens at the end of May, and as I approach that, I begin thinking that I would like to have a celebration, to celebrate something worth celebrating, while I still have the means to make it happen. I thought about it, and then one day I was listening to Maria Hinojosa on Latino USA, and her guest was Ben Sáenz. They were talking about Ben's book, his masterpiece, one might say, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and about his new book, Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. Maria Hinojosa was speaking about all the young boys who had given testimony about how Ben's work changed their lives. More specifically, they came to understand that they were not alone in their struggle to figure out who they were and why they had certain feelings. And they were given the freedom to recognize who they were and to see themselves as complete human beings. I just want to read a few paragraphs here. Trigger warning, this is from the end of the book, if you haven't got there yet. Most of you probably have, so you know what I'm about to say. As Dante and I lay on our backs in the bed of my pickup and gazed out at the summer stars, I was free. Imagine that, Aristotle Mendoza, a free man. I wasn't afraid anymore. I thought of that look on my mother's face when I told her I was ashamed. I thought of that look of love and compassion that she wore as she looked at me. Ashamed? Of loving Dante? I took Dante's hand and held it. How could I have ever been ashamed of loving Dante Quintana? It's beautiful. This is truly something to celebrate, enabling hundreds and thousands of young people, gay and lesbian, trans, straight, and beyond, to escape the bonds of shame and to discover who they truly are. Moreover, at a time, forgive my language, when morons around the country, most of whom claim to be Christians, are trying to stifle children and adults and to tell them that they must be ashamed of who they are. In this time, the work and example of Ben Sáenz is something that we must celebrate. In doing so, we're standing up against the darkness and the cruelty, the mental torture that many of our governors and other public figures want to commit against our youth. So I mentioned this to Daniel Chacon and said that I would like to have a celebration of Ben and his work. And now Daniel could have said, well, I'm too busy, it's that time of the year, too many deadlines. But he didn't. Within a week, he and Alessandra Narvaez Varela sat down with me. And they said that they had Tim Z on board, that he'd spoken to Ben about tonight's event, and he was excited, and things went on from there. Our speakers for tonight enthusiastically said yes, they would participate. And they included the poet laureate, Juan Felipe Herrera. And welcome, Juan. It's good to have you here with us tonight. He's come some way. I was going to say he came from Los Angeles, but he's actually come from South Carolina, which is even further, I guess. So thanks for coming. Of course, we hit some tank traps along the way. There were no appropriate venues on the campus at UTEP. Imagine that. No appropriate venues for Ben Sáenz. So, as Eric said, I phoned Eric Pearson, and he immediately said yes, the El Paso Community Foundation would participate. And I think that's better. Our top priority in the College of Liberal Arts is to engage with the community. The university always said that their mission is access and excellence, but too often access simply meant inviting students from Paso del Norte to come to the U.S. campus and take classes. That's not enough. Our mission in the college follows Archbishop Romero's and Paul Farmer's example of accompaniment. If we have skills, let's ask the community, how can we partner with you to achieve your needs and your goals? Let us come out of the classroom and into the neighborhoods and the colonias. So it is fitting that we're holding this event tonight in the El Paso Community Forum, off of the campus. I want to thank Eric and all of the people at the foundation for partnering with us to make this event happen, especially Maggie Sanchez Mercado, Yaranelli Castro, and Omar Carranza. And before I turn things over to Daniel to become the MC of the events tonight, I also want to thank all of the people in the creative writing department and the dean's office who helped make this happen. Apart from Daniel and his crew, and the many students who have come to help make this event happen, I especially want to recognize Yvonne Carranza-Rolfe, without whom it seems no events would ever happen in the College of Liberal Arts. You know, we had already scheduled a big event for last night, which was an awards recognition for people all around the college. And Yvonne didn't complain, she just said okay, and she's been working really, really hard to make sure that this event happened. So we want to thank her. We also want to thank Estela Estrada, Brenda Velasquez, Ali Amparan, Cynthia Marentes, who leads our efforts to engage with community partners, Laura Miranda, Edith Yanes, and Julian Flores. And if I missed anyone, please do forgive me. Lastly, as I look around at friends, and friends have been, I just want to quote another great writer and a great human being, Kurt Vonnegut Jr., and say, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. Daniel.
We're here tonight for one of two reasons. Because we love poetry, or because we love Benjamin Alida Sainz, or both. And by love of poetry, I don't mean just verse. I mean creative writing in general, because fiction, like poetry, honors language, sound, music. Poetry and fiction may have been torn asunder generations ago, but even God cannot stop the two of them from joining together in great works of written art. Fiction writers love the sound of a good sentence, like this one. The summer sun was not meant for boys like me. Boys like me belong to the rain. That's a line from Aristotle and Dante, Discover the Secrets of the Universe. We love the poetry in the works of Benjamin Sainz, and we are here today to celebrate the writer. But some of us are here today, in fact, the majority of us, because we love Ben Sainz, the man. Even if he wasn't famous, wasn't on the New York Times bestseller list, even if there wasn't a major motion picture about to be released based on his novel, some of us in this room love Ben so much we would still gather together to celebrate with him, although it would probably be at the tap with nachos and beer. And this homage to El Paso's greatest living writer is long overdue. UTEP owes a lot to Benjamin, not only because how he has brought so much attention to our university, but also because of all he had to endure in his decades committed to staying at our university until retirement. And you can believe he was recruited by a lot of other universities, but he always said, no, UTEP is my home. El Paso is my home. For decades, he had to experience racism and homophobia, and even though he was one of the most published emerging authors in the country, up until his last several years with us, he was practically ignored by his colleagues. Keep in mind that when Ben started working at UTEP, it was still a white enclave in El Paso. Very few Latinx administrators and professors. He put up with a lot of bullshit. But UTEP was his home. And one of our greatest historical figures, Diana Natalicio, loved Benjamin. Oh, she loved him. She loved him so much, I wouldn't doubt that she's here right now saying, "It's about time." Or, of course, she was really cool. She might do it like this. "Daniel, it's about time." Tonight, we gathered a group of great poets and friends of Benjamin for this long overdue homenaje a nuestra poeta favorito. We have great writers here to honor a great writer. We have Alessandra Narvaez Valera, Timsy Hernandez, Bobby and Lee Bird, Alfredo Corchado, and Juan Felipe Herrera. But the guest speakers are not the only people responsible for this great night and what makes tonight a great night. The team at the El Paso Community Foundation have worked hard for all of us. And I would like to mention their names again. Maggie Sanchez Mercado, Omar Carranza, who made all that wonderful food. Yaranelli Castro, and the team from the Dean's Office, and especially Ivan Carranza Rolf. And of course, the team from the Creative Writing Department and Words on a Wire. And I would love to mention everybody's name, but thank you so much, Creative Writing, for all of this. Our first speaker tonight is Alessandra Narvaez Valera. She is a native of the Twin Cities. She got her bachelor's in creative writing right here at UTEP. The very first class is Intro to Creative Writing, and she was in my class, and I pretty much take responsibility for her success. And then she got her MFA here, but she always speaks of how profoundly Ben, her professor, has influenced her creativity. She has been published in multiple peer-reviewed literary journals and has recently released what is becoming one of the most popular YA novels to come out of El Paso. I mean, she's got a lot of competition here. It's called 30 Talks Weird Love. It's a novel in verse, and it is beautiful. Alessandra, like Ben, is a UTEP treasure.
Good evening. I'm honored to be here. Hola, profesor. I haven't seen him in a while. In the prologue of the Book of What Remains, published in 2010, Benjamin Alire Sáenz haunts and hooks the reader with this insight. Human memory is fickle, untrustworthy. We alter our memorias as we remember them, creating imperfect patchwork stories of our past. But this doesn't discourage the author who writes, "Even if no memory is true, despite all of that, there must be some truth that remains, even within the lie. And that truth is what I'm hanging on to." I agree with this sentiment, especially when it comes to our most precious memories, which is why I've brought up the Book of What Remains, one of his 7 collections of poetry, one of his 21 books, and why I hang on to it as an anchor to relive the time when I met Benjamin Alire Sáenz, the semester of spring 2011. He was my professor of reading and writing fiction in Worrell Hall at 3 p.m. The time might be a lie. However, The rest is as true can get because I have a transcript to prove it. During this time, this collection of poetry was also being discussed in a separate class, which, as you can imagine, made for a beautiful, complex connection for a student. Benjamin Alire Sáenz as a professor and a living poet. More tangible even than holding this precious book and rereading it several times since that spring, as you can see with the tabs, letting the senses take over intellect, is the impact Professor Sáenz has had in my life as a writer, student, and teacher. That impacto explains the remarkably clear memory of Benjamin Alire Sáenz in my life. Being his student while also discussing his work, plus seeing him as I do in my mind's eye, the epitome of what I always imagine writers to look and move like. That's another layer of certainty. The image of him is so clear, so crisp, I have to share it. A vest over a blue shirt, black rimmed glasses, and that sal and pimienta hair framing his face as he taught us about the grotesque in Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio, about the links between fiction and poetry, about the juggling act that is to be a writer and a teacher, throwing pins in the air while selling cacahuates and hats, balancing a motorcycle, and not breaking a sweat under the desert sun. On this point, El Desierto, which Benjamin Alire Sáenz so loves, I would like to stop what could become an overly gushing walk through memory lane. Instead, to give myself some structure, I will meditate in sequence like it's done in this beautiful book, the Book of What Remains, and I will start each meditation with direct quotes or paraphrases. 1, the rains do not always come, and they don't. If rain means the right words to say gracias for leaving behind ribbons tagged to ocotillos so your students could follow in your steps. Still, I will take all the clouds this desert can muster and press them mercilessly for you, professor. 2, a poet's job is to know the names of all things, Denise Levertov recommends. What do you call a writer that visits genres, from children's and young adult literature to fiction and poetry, like a hummingbird? Elegant, swift, and brilliant? Answer, Benjamin Alire Sáenz. 3, I never met a Mexican who had time to lean on a cactus. Me neither, professor. And I never met a writer like you who sweat fronterizo, bilingual pride, defending the magic of the border, not as exotic, but factual, a way of life, when you upheld the Spanish and Spanglish in writing with these words. I cling to my culture because it is my memory. And what is a poet without memory? I cling to my culture because it is my skin, because it is my heart, because it is my voice. 4, do not attempt to cross the desert on foot. This is serious business. The desert is writing, the desert is publishing, and you've burned your blessed feet and grown a rock for a tongue, blazing trails for poetas and writers like me who grew up thinking writing was a white business, a fairy tale business, a monolingual business, an oasis seen only by the lucky. But el negocio has been disrupted, hasn't it, professor? You showed us and fought for the business to be as brown and bilingual, as fronterizo as we want it to be. Five, Wallace Stevens' blackbirds come into my yard sometimes. Do they still, professor? You know who comes into mind lately as a YA author? Zach, Sal, Sammy, Juliana, Ramiro, Jake, Aristotle, and Dante. They tell me young adult literature is as beautiful and evocative and complex as poetry. They tell me to be as gracious a vessel as Benjamin Alire Sáenz has been to tell stories of pain, love, and growing up. 6, by August, the pods of the mesquite will hang heavy and fall to the ground. As a boy, you chewed the pods, pretended they were sugarcane. One summer, years after, you chewed again and spit when reading the New York Times book review. I can't speak for what you did or didn't do this past fall when Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World was praised by the New York Times book review and became a New York Times bestseller. Pero profesor, your accolades became El Mezquite y la Mezquita, una metáfora for chewing and spitting what celebrates and challenges us as writer, so like you, like this resilient tree of the desert, we fight and we remain. 7, your dreams will not save you from the sun. Your dreams will not save you from the sun. It's been 11 years since you came into my life, marking a before and after. And I have found myself blistered because you were right. There's no shade in dreams, even though so many of them take root in our hearts. But there are kinder days when dreams triumph over fire and heat. Days like today, when I can say my first book exists because your dreams shared in mine and that of so many others in the cruelest of summers. 7, 8, actually. 8. In your last meditation, you named location, the desert, of course, the time, 10 a.m., the weather, the hottest day of the year of your death. You even wanted people to cuss out the sun as you smiled. It was that or living forever. May I ask you choose the latter, even though you're already immortal through your literary legacy. May I ask the audience to say the following to seal this inmortalidad. Viva Benjamin Alire Sáenz. Can you join me? Viva Benjamin Alire Sáenz. All this said, Professor, it was still very gushy and cursi, you know me. But these are some of the truths I hang on to. This is the book of what remains and grows of your life, in my life, and for that, muchísimas gracias, con todo mi corazón.
Wow. I just had a vision of the future. One of these days, maybe I don't know how many years from now, we're going to be gathered in this same room, or one very much like it, to honor another UTEP creative writer, Timothy Hernandez. He's the author of multiple books, but his latest work of fiction, All They Will Call You, has just scored a movie deal, an audio book, and I think it's in its 5th or 6th printing. He has a book of poems forthcoming from Beacon Press, a New York poetry press. Who gets poetry published in New York? Timothy Hernandez, that's who. I'd like to welcome Timothy Hernandez to the podium.
Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here with all of my friends and colleagues. Before I say, I'm going to tell you a little story, but before I get into that, actually, when the pandemic began in 2020, well, when it sort of seeped its way, when it made its way to El Paso, the early start of 2020, I didn't know what to do with my children, as many of us didn't know what to do, and they were home with me, and we were in this small space. And it was just us three, and I said, they kept looking at me like they were looking for, something to do. And I said, here, read Theo Benny's books. And they said, oh, this big one, this doorstop, this giant book? Yeah, Aristotle and Dante. And my kids said, well, I had 2 copies. Because I'm friends with Ben, I had 2 copies. So I said, here's one for you and one for you. So my kids both read those books, and I had never before seen them read that voraciously and that quickly. And they said, where's the next part? And I said, I don't know. Let's call Ben. I can text him. I know I can text him and see if there's going to be a part 2. And sure enough, I texted Ben, there's going to be a part 2. You got to wait for that. Okay. So Ben says you got to wait for that. It's coming, maybe. I don't know, but anyway. So when Daniel, began organizing this event, I thought it would just be nice to invite them up to speak a little bit, so you hear from the young readers that appreciate Ben's stories in his books. So I'm going to invite first my daughter Rumi, who is 17, and she's a future minor, or she's coming up. So Rumi, come on up here.
Good evening, everyone. Let me see. Okay. So I first came across Benjamin's work upon moving to the city with my little brother and my father. As if my brother and I, struggling to navigate the confusing and complicated nuances of my parents' separation, wasn't enough already. We were also in a new state, a new city, a new school, struggling to make sense of not only our unfamiliar surroundings, but where we fit into that as well. Now, while I love to read, there are also only a few books that I can wholeheartedly say I have acquired basically an obsession for. But here I am at almost 18 years of age, being as excited about the release of the Aristotle and Dante sequel as I was about the first novel at my little awkward preteen self. Benjamin Saenz has not only written a heartwarming story that intersects a multitude of real-world issues, from homophobia, sexism, racism, and grief, to generational trauma and the exploration of sexuality in new relationships. But his work has served as a beacon of hope for anyone, including myself, who has struggled to find a sense of belonging amidst the everyday chaos that consumes us. The Aristotle and Dante series is only one of many absolutely beautiful works by Benjamin Alire Saenz, and I stand here today on behalf of all of the awkward, insecure Mexican-American teens who are trying to come to terms with and own who we are, in the utmost gratitude to have been so lucky to have grown up with these characters. It is passages from his book, like the one I'm about to read to you from his new book, Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World, that have helped shape my view of the world. So I'm gonna read a little passage. Sorry, trying to find my place. I'm sorry, it's because I had my paper as a bookmark, and then I just realized I took it out, so, love that. It would only happen to me. Let me see. Oh. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I know, I was like, America, okay, so this is the passage. America is the country of invention. We are a people who constantly invent and reinvent ourselves. Mostly our inventions of who we are fictions. We invent who Black people are and make them out to be violent and criminal. But our inventions are about us and not about them. We invent who Mexicans are, and we become nothing more than a people who eat tacos and break piñatas. We invent reasons to fight wars because war is what we know, and we make those wars into heroic marches toward peace, when there is nothing heroic about war. Men are killed in wars, young men. We tell ourselves they died to protect our freedoms, even when we know that is a lie. I find it a tragedy that such an inventive people cannot bring themselves to invent peace. Thank you.
Salvador, come on up. Now, this is my son, Salvador, who is, he's 13, but he's also a future minor. Hey!
Can we sit down, please? Because I'm short, and you already know I'm short. All right. I have it on my phone because I don't want to print it out. Okay. Hold on, I gotta find it. Give me a second. I'm sorry, hold on. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of people. Okay. Not with this many people, I can't. Come on, man. Okay. I'll just point out that if my phone shuts down while I'm reading, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm really excited to be here with all of you guys and hope that you people will have as much fun as I'm having right now. I'm really glad you all came to support Ben in all of his books, including the first one that I read from him I put oh my god, typo. Is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I read this book during the pandemic because I was bored. But when I read the book, I thought to myself that this book was so beautiful and had an amazing story. When my dad told me about it, I looked at him and gave him this face. And then I said to him, Tim, let's be real for a second here. But as soon as I opened the book, I was stunned to see how beautiful the story was. My personal favorite word or quote from that book is when Aristotle says, I hope you like the sketch of your chair. I missed you at the pool. The lifeguards are jerks. This quote was heartwarming in my opinion. I am so glad that my dad showed me this book, because if he didn't show me it, then this wouldn't have happened to me. Well, it would have, but I would have sounded like a kid who hasn't read Aristotle and Dante. I would have been like, hi guys, I'm so excited to read this. I'm so excited to tell you guys this book that I never knew about or never even read. If you wouldn't mind, I would want to say something to you guys when I was at school. When I was at school, I saw a boy in class getting teased because he was bisexual. And that hurt me personally because I'm also bisexual too. I still am. Because it's heartbreaking because there's some jerks out there in the world that are just history repeats itself. So, where am I? Hold on, give me a second. Okay, hold on, I'm sorry. It's a cycle that we cannot break, and I wish we could. Thank you, Ben, for inviting me up here, and thank you guys for being here to support Ben in his books. Thank you guys. I hope Ben continues writing his books. Also, I forgot to tell you guys something. Ben, I said I could write part 3 of Aristotle and Dante, but we all know that I don't get that much experience in writing, so. Because, small brain. I don't even know what 1 + 1 is, I'm just kidding. But thank you guys.
See, Ben, he remembered that when he had asked Ben, are you going to write a part 3? And Ben said, well, you should write it. He said, okay, I will. I have a small story to share. Actually, I first want to say, out of all these accolades and all these wonderful things we've been saying about our friend Benjamin here, the one thing that we would be remiss if we let the night go without saying is how attractive of a man Benjamin Sáenz is also. But here's the thing. I'm gonna tell you a story of just how attractive he is, okay? It's a small story. It's a quick story. I've told this story before, but I'm also at the age now where I can get away with repeating my stories. So, and I can just point out the power and circularity in a narrative, because we're among writers also, right? It's fitting that I'm here, obviously, to honor my friend Ben. But it's fitting that I'm here to honor him alongside another friend of mine, Juan Felipe Herrera. And I'm going to tell you why. Back in 1995, way back, when I was just 21 and still very much a transient hobo, I began living on Juan Felipe Herrera's couch. And after I would devour all the leftover lasagna that his lovely wife Margarita would leave in the fridge, and after I would raid his cupboards, and there was nothing left to eat in the house, Juan Felipe would feed me the only thing that was left in the house, books. And the very first book, I'll never forget, that he handed to me off the shelf was a collection of poetry titled Calendar of Dust by some dude with a very long name that had at least 12 syllables, Benjamin Alires Sáenz. At that time, my name was still barely half a syllable, Tim. So I figured this guy must be an important poet with a multisyllabic name like that. And so I read his book. And I know this is the part where I'm supposed to say, his book changed my life, but the truth is it didn't. It didn't do anything for me. I don't even remember much about the book, to be honest. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a key. So I would go on to eat up the rest of Juan Felipe's books, and when I had my fill, I finally got off his couch and left his house. Of course, I thanked him, because I'm not a Neanderthal after all, and I ventured off into the vast, infinite world on my own. Although I didn't know it at the time, upon reading Calendar of Dust, I would succumb to the mystical spell that I would later learn was referred to as the attraction of Benjamin Alires Sáenz. Or in Spanish, La Atracción de Benjamín Alire Sáenz. If I had paid attention at the time, I might have seen that the clues were all there. The spell was already made up of an alignment. So here it is, listen. On the very first page of Calendar of Dust, the book handed to me by Juan Felipe Herrera, there's a quote by the legendary beat poet Allen Ginsberg, who co-founded Naropa University. Ginsberg's quote is, "America, why are your libraries full of tears?" The location of where we were in that moment when Juan Felipe Herrera handed me Calendar of Dust was in Fresno, California, on El Paso Street. In the following years, you with me? In the following years, the attraction of Benjamín Alire Sáenz would take hold. For after reading Calendar of Dust, I suddenly found myself attending, where else? Naropa University, co-founded by Allen Ginsberg. Only to end up where else? But right here on El Paso Street. With, of course, Benjamín and Juan Felipe Herrera sitting here. Circularity, didn't I tell you? We can repeat these stories now. Nowadays, of course, he's known to me and my kids as Tío Benny. I tell my kids, read Tío Benny's books. They might not change your life, kids. You might not even remember them in 25 years. But there is a key in there somewhere that will unlock a door you have yet to arrive at. Love you, Ben. Thank you, guys. Ben.
It's my pleasure to introduce Lee and Bobby Bird, the magnificent birds, los magníficos pájaros. While the spelling of their last name doesn't warrant the translation, I believe the metaphor applies because thanks to Cinco Puntos Press, the publishing house they founded in 1985, now an imprint of Lee and Loeb books, the stories told by Latinx and other writers of color took off in a flight that continues to this day. With over 300 titles published in the 36 years of love, sweat, and more sweat that Lee and Bobby Bird put into a business they were new to, they gave us, to name just two, the groundbreaking Sammy and Juliana in Hollywood, one of the first YA titles focused on Latinx teenagehood by the homenajeado tonight, Benjamín Alire Sáenz, and the equally astounding Ringside to the Revolution, an illuminating immersion into the underground cultural history of El Paso and Ciudad Juárez, written by David Romo. On a personal note, when Cinco Puntos Press accepted my manuscript for publication, my life changed. But that's just one life they have transformed through their passion to tell stories that, though now matter to the publishing business, always mattered to the magnificent birds. Thank you for your vision and bravery. Please join me in welcoming them.
We're going to do this separate because that's, as Alfredo Corchado, when he was talking about, he says, that's the way we roll. And that's the way Lee and I roll, and we've always rolled that way. First, Lee and I want to congratulate the UTEP Creative Writing Department. When we arrived in El Paso in 1978, this is not what the writing department, nor the English department looked like, nor what it felt like. Moving here to El Paso, we felt like we had finally found home. But at UTEP, so many writers and teachers back then felt like they got dead-ended at the tail end of academia. We did not feel welcome on the campus. Tonight, though, it's all different. We are here We are honored to be here with the writing department, readers and writers, celebrating our friend Benjamin Alidi Sainz. He was the pivot, the cornerstone of making this wonderful transformation happen. There's a story I tell. Bill, you can't cry. One night, we were at Denise Chavez and Daniel Zielinski's house. It was like in the 1990s, early 1990s, maybe 1989 or something, in Las Cruces. Ben and I were outside on the front porch, on the front steps, smoking cigarettes, of course. He was all excited, telling me how Broken Moon of Press of Seattle had published his book of poems, Calendar of Dust, and they were soon to publish his collection of short stories, Flowers for the Broken. Both, by the way, very great books. Cinco Puntos was 5 years old. We were publishing books in the garage and our bedroom. We were warehousing them on the front porch. I got angry listening at Ben. God damn it, Ben, I yelled at him. You're always telling people how glad you are you moved back to the border. But you're publishing your books in Seattle? What's that about? Ben took a long, long drag on his cigarette and looked at me. He said, "You're right." A few years later, we published his wonderful book of poems, Dark and Perfect Angels. 8 other books were to follow. 2 books of poems, 4 illustrated children's books, 2 wonderful YA novels, and his now classic collection of short stories, Everything Begins and Ends at the Kentucky Club. Kentucky Club won the PEN/Faulkner Award for Best Fiction. It was the first time a Latinx writer had ever won that award, and was only the second time the winner was published by a small press. On that note, I want to say here that I introduced our good friend and his literary agent to Patsy Moosbrugger. Raise your hand, Patty. Patty had worked with George Gibson at Walker Books, and she knew the importance of independent publishing to the ecosystem, to the healthy ecosystem of literature. And she championed Cinco Puntos, and she and Ben throughout all thick and thin, a lot of, not much thick, a lot of thin, but they were great, great good friends, and we thank them very, very much for that. And unlike other agents, and I think this is very important, unlike other agents, when a writer makes a name for herself or himself, she did not try to take or snag our books from Cinco Puntos and publish them in New York. She and Ben stood by our books, and we appreciated that, and Cinco Puntos would never have ever accomplished what it did without Ben's books. I've been thinking a lot about Ben and our friendship since Daniel first asked Lee and me to speak here tonight. Surprisingly enough, the word that suits him best is courageous. A courageous man. That word found me. I did not find it. After Stanford, he could have gone anywhere and be a writer and have a comfortable life. but he chose to come home. So many other of our writers and authors, artists, have left and stayed gone. I don't blame them. I did the same thing. I left Memphis. But Ben came home. He chose the roots of his imagination. He chose El Paso. He chose UTEP. It must not have been easy. He is a gay man raised in a deeply Catholic family by his mother, loving, very loving mother, Eloisa. She remains, as he will tell you, and as Gloria will tell you, his spiritual guide. He was married and divorced. He was in and out of rehab. And when he came out announcing his sexuality, he did so with great abandon. There's a picture of Ben somewhere. Some of you have probably seen it. He is parachuting out of an airplane. He is diving into a huge, huge blue sky, and there's a wonderful smile on his face. He was very happy. He was very courageous. And luckily for us, the parachute opened. Good for him and good for all of us. Thank you, Brother Man. I love you.
Oh, I'm going to be just like Tim's son. Whew, there's so many people out there. Oh, thank you all for inviting us. Contrary to what many people assumed, Cinco Puntos Press didn't start out to publish Latino or Chicano or Mexican writers when we started. We actually didn't know what we were doing when we started. We did, though, want to publish good writing, and we found it on the border. We were diverse before everyone started talking about diversity because we lived here where diversity lives, and we loved what we heard and saw. And people were writing about place and about their lives in this place. So we were publishing many books by Ben, and somewhere in there, maybe 2005, our colleague Jessica Powers suggested we think about doing books for young adults. YA books. We didn't know anything about YA books, but that never stopped us before. And about that time, Ben brought us a book with a protagonist who was an old man telling a story about himself when he was 16 or 17. We suggested he get rid of the old man and just let the 16-year-old tell the story. That was that you, Jesse? That was his first YA, Sammy and Juliana in Hollywood, one of our all-time favorite books. Sammy and Juliana took people by surprise. It was so rich and deep and so incredibly well written and so full of the angst of growing up on the border in Las Cruces. Is that a border, Las Cruces? Okay, anyhow. We were at a big National Library conference in Boston the year it came out, and Sammy and Juliana was being considered for a very big fiction award, the Prince Award. We were so excited. Maybe the book would be a winner. But we didn't get that award. We heard one of the award committee members say later she couldn't vote for Sammy and Juliana because she'd never heard a Mexican use the word ephemeral. It's true, that's a true story. What was she saying? How could a book that was clearly as good as Sammy and Juliana be written by a Mexican? That was the climate writers of color were coming up against in the late 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. Awards and reviews were hard to come by, especially for writers of color being published by small presses on the border. And awards and reviews, as we often complain to the National Review magazines, sell books. Sammy and Juliana was named one of the top 10 best books for young adults in 2006. Ben's next YA, Last Night I Sang to the Monster, was also a top 10 best book in the year it came out, 2010. YA books were clearly where Ben was going to shine, and shine he did and has. Let me preface what I'm going to say by talking about editing for a minute, especially editing in the context of a small press where resources, including money, are in short supply, where there's only 4 or 5 of you in the whole office, and there's a continual rich collaboration. Editing and working together like that is such a deeply intimate process. You get down into the words, you get into the text, and you get knit together in a way as you plan the book, as you present it and market it. Ben was fun to work with and easy to edit. You could just tell him, look, Ben, that scene doesn't work. You didn't have to tell him how to make it work. He would fix it, so he didn't, so it would work. He's a craftsman, a worker, careful with his words. But then the big houses were noticing Ben, noticing that Chicanos and Latinos and Mexicans could really, really write, and there was a huge market for their writing. So when Ben wrote Aristotle and Dante discovered the secrets of the universe, he was gone. The big houses got him, of course. And yeah, that was good. In advance, it made our eyes pop out. Huge marketing budgets, exactly what was needed for the next step. Did it hurt us? Oh, yeah. It did. It felt like having your boyfriend drop in to tell you he just found a new girl or a new guy. That's just how it was. We were all so close. But thank God, all that's done. By the very grace of God, we're done with Cinco Puntos. And Ben is doing really well. There's nothing left to do but rejoice. Good for you, Benny. Good for you. We're so proud of you and delighted to have been part of your journey and your legacy.
I was going to look up ephemeral, but I couldn't find my phone. One of Ben's closest friends is also one of the best journalists in the Americas. He writes about the Twin Cities, about the border, the drug wars, and about Mexico. His best-selling book, Midnight in Mexico, which I hear a rumor is about to be a movie, a major motion picture. Is that correct? It's a rumor. I could see it, and you know, I know who could play you. I'll tell you later. And he also wrote another best-selling book called Homelands. He writes for the Dallas Morning News, and his love for our border cities equals that of Ben's. So it makes sense that they were such good friends. And I have to say this, several years before Midnight in Mexico came out, Ben told me, hey, I have this friend, Alfredo, he's working on this book, and I think it's going to be great. And he believed in it right from the beginning. And apparently you would read chapters to him and show it to him, and Ben was so excited about it. And so I'm so happy that you're here today, Alfredo. Alfredo Cocharro.
Thank you. Feel very privileged and honored to be here, especially with some fellow colleagues from the San Joaquin Valley, Daniel, Tim, Juan. I also want to thank the El Paso Community Foundation and Eric Pearson and my alma mater, the University of Texas at El Paso, Dean Ahorn, for paying homage to a border treasure, a giant, a legend that reminds us of this special place that we call home. I just looked up and realized that my editor, Tom Wong, is here. He flew in from Dallas, and he always tells me, just get to the point. So I'm going to get to the point. Ciudad Juárez has Juan Gabriel. El Paso has Benjamin Alide Saenz. And somewhere in the middle, perhaps at El Kentucky, the magic takes place. as Daniel said, I work for the Dallas Morning News. I cover Mexico, cover the border. And thanks largely to Benjamin, I'm also an author. And I'll get to that later. Before I started calling him El Cabroncito, Ben was already a world-renowned author. Back in the early 1990s, I would serve him huevos rancheros and coffee at my parents' restaurant, Freddy's Cafe, just a few blocks from here on South El Paso Street. He was a good tipper because at one point in his life, he was also a waiter. As a journalist today, trying to explain the border, not just to Texans, but to the world, Ben's work has often been the inspiration, a way to add much needed context to people who may see us as misfits along the Rio Grande. One of his works that has inspired me over the years, and perhaps is more relevant than ever, is In the City in Which I Live. All my life, let me say this so you understand, all my life I have heard stories of the river and how people were willing to die to cross it, to die just to get to the other side. The other side was the side I lived on. And people died to get here. My mother nodded at my question in a way that told me she was too busy to discuss the matter and went back to her ritual of rolling out tortillas for her 7 children, some of whom have asked questions she has no answers for. We were poor as a summer without rain. We had an outhouse and a pipe bringing in cold water from the well that was unreliable as the white man's treaty with the Indians, unreliable as my drunk uncles, unreliable as my father's Studebaker truck. I was 6. It was impossible for me to fathom why anyone would risk death for the chance to live like us. I think about that passage often as I write stories about today's situation on the border. I really have gotten to know Ben better in the last 2 decades. Angela and I once invited Ben to my parents' house for menudo. It was February 1st, 2010. We were so excited that we looked at his poems and we were practicing, trying to make sure we had a good conversation with Ben, because it was really intimidating to have Benjamin at our house. We were so excited, but the conversation was cut short as we had to run to Ciudad Juárez to cover a birthday massacre in Colonia Villa Salvarcar. I didn't think I would get another chance to really get to know Ben, but that was the first of many tragedies that have forever bonded us. Our friendship over the years has just bloomed. He was there for one of the most terrifying moments in my life, at a crucial, difficult moment. I was trying to be an author, and I was facing deadlines, and I also had writer's block. So I had just been awarded a really good contract from a major publishing house, and I wanted to find a way to tell the publishing house, I'm not going to be able to write the book, because I was nervous, I was scared, and I thought maybe I'll call Ben so Ben can teach me, tell me how to say no without burning the bridge. And we sat at near UTEP at I still remember the moment. It was at Crave's restaurant, and I get there and we order some wine and we're drinking wine, and I finally tell Ben, "Hey Ben, I can't do this. Deep down, I'm really a journalist. I'm a reporter. I can't really be an author." And he just kind of looked at me, kind of wasn't buying it. And he said, I'm going to beat the shit out of the reporter out of you and teach you how to be a writer. And I think it was probably the third, fourth glass of wine, but he said, what's the book called? And I said, Midnight in Mexico. And he said, okay, that's simple. Let me ask you a simple question. What is it that you like about Mexico? What is it that you miss about Mexico? And I said, the summer rains. I was born in Durango, and to this day, I still remember the summer rains. And he said, what about the rains? And literally, I didn't have a notepad. I remember I kept looking for my notepad and had nothing. And Ben said, take the napkins. And I just started writing. And he was being the reporter, asking me the questions. What about the rains? And so that day, this is the way the book opens. When the rains fall in Mexico, all is forgiven. The raindrops cleanse the metropolitan Mexico City sky, sweeping away the smog that traps 20 million people in the suffocating embrace, bringing everything into sharp focus over the southern edge of the city. The cleansing es una limpia, the ancient rite healing a scarred, misunderstood land, always on the cusp of greatness, a country riding to free itself from the curse of history and geography, for better or for worse, tucked in the indifferent shadow of my adopted homeland, the United States. The moment of forgiveness is fleeing. The hole in heaven closes. And Ben looked at me and said, that is your book. That is your voice. Go out there and write a book. Stop sending stuff to your editor in New York and send me the stuff, and I will help you become an author. So he helped me write Midnight in Mexico and later Homelands. Benjamin Alida Saenz is rarely on time. At times, he doesn't even show up to things you invite him for. I'm shocked that he's here tonight. But Benjamin always comes through for his friends and his cities, whether it's Las Cruces, El Paso, or Ciudad Juárez. Muchas, muchas gracias, mi cabroncito. Te quiero un chingo.
Gracias también, Alfredo, my homie from the San Joaquin Valley. Juan Felipe Herrera is an international award-winning author, performance artist, musician, visual artist. In the words of the poet Victor Hernandez Cruz, he is a total expression mechanism, and that's true. Juan Felipe has over 24 books, including poetry, children's books, nonfiction, and plays, including titles Every Day We Get More Illegal, Notes on the Assemblage, Senegal Taxi, 187 Reasons Mexicanos Don't Cross the Border, or Can't Cross the Border, sorry, and Half of the World in Light, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award. 2012, he was named Poet Laureate of California, and in 2015, he was selected as the first Latino Poet Laureate of the United States. For which he served at the time an unprecedented two terms. They invited him back, so it wasn't just a fluke. Yeah, you were legit, man. What his bio won't tell you is how many writers and artists he has mentored over the many, many years, myself included. That said, let's have a nice round of applause for Maestro Juan Felipe Herrera.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. You know what's beautiful tonight is the love that everyone is expressing. El amor que tenemos en nuestro corazón para Benjamin Alida Saenz. The compassion, the kindness, el buen corazón. And I think that's what's at the heart of Benjamin's work. And this is what happened tonight. The book opened in front of us. Se abrió el libro de Benjamín aquí en este espacio. Salieron las palabras de transformación, las palabras del corazón, las palabras de comunidad, las palabras nuevas, las palabras jóvenes, las palabras que se encontraron en el momento y nosotros como comunidad. So everything that we've talked about, Ben's work itself and Ben himself, that magic has been presented in the voices of everyone. The new voices, the love, the tears, the smiles, the transformations, the embrace, the discovery, the relationships, all those beautiful things that do not exist in many places. At this time, there's so much violence. At this time, there's incredible war that's ripping people's lives apart. But at this time, in this space, there's love, there's compassion, there's kindness, there's embraces, abrazos, amor, comunidad en este momento, en este espacio. So lo que estamos celebrando es ese corazón colectivo. What we're celebrating is that collective heart. What we're celebrating is what emerges from the words and pages and years and decades of work and dedication and vision de Benjamín Alida Sainz. And I think that's what we want. That's what we queremos in our classes, in our first trials, in our first drafts, in our struggle to finish a book and discover in our interviews and finding it and what is it and where's it going, I don't know. It's all those things. It's all those things. If we can just pour a glass of kindness into the page, just like Ben did when he talked with Corchado, the love began and the writing began. And Alessandra, the writing began, the love began, and the creativity began. And so the book is not just in the book. The writing is not just in the writing. The book and the writing is right here. It takes place when we come together. And it takes place when we give so many years and so much time and so much pain and so much aloneness, solitos en un cuartito, ahí nomás martillando en un cuartito. ¿Qué estás haciendo allí? No, pues estoy martillando una novela. Ya tienes mucho tiempo allí, Benjamín. Sí, pero estoy acabando la primera página. You know, all that time in there, Benjamin. What are you doing? I'm finishing the first page, you know. You don't make so much noise, you know. I just started it. It's a lot of work, ¿verdad? Mucho trabajo. Vamos a darle una gran mano a Benjamín. Let's get it together. So I wanted to talk about that. Quería decir esas cosas. Tenemos los libros, pero en esos libros están esos momentos. We have those books. But in those books, those are the moments that exist in there. And the moments come out right here with Sal and Rumi and all the speakers. The books opened up over here. They were supposed to be in the library or in our satchel, but the books came up alive right here. Los libros nacieron aquí otra vez. Se presentaron los libros aquí con sus voces, con su relación al trabajo de Benjamín, con sus principios, como Salvador Hernández aquí estaba. No, mira cuánta gente hay ahí, mira cuánta gente. Pero es lo que, that's what it's all made. That's what it's made out of. That's what it's made out of. Tantos años trabajando hacia ese gol, hacia esa meta, que a ver si saco este libro, Broken Moon Press, pero algo es algo, a ver si sale el librito. And then you get up here y go, ay, mira, pero cuánta gente está allí, hombre. Yo nomás quería hablarle a 3, 4 personas, pero mira, hay como 2,000 personas aquí. ¿Qué está pasando? So this is part of it. Without an audience, without a community, no hay libros. And without our publishers that kick us off. You know, like the Bird family, sin amigos y amigas o amistades y amistades o personas que quieren publicar y apenas estamos empezando, it's the greatest thing. And they lift us up. Y así también con Benjamín, lifted Benjamín up. Y los profesores aquí con los estudiantes, lifted them up. So una mano para todos y ven otra vez. Yeah. Así que voy a inventar un cuentito. Okay, here we go. I'm going to invent a little story. No, pues hace muchos años, long time ago, I was walking down the street, and Ben was walking this way, and I was walking that way. And I said, Ben, ¿a dónde vas? And Ben said, Pa. And then he said, ¿y tú, Felipe? ¿Para dónde vas? Papá. ¿Para dónde? Pues pa. ¿Y tú? Pues para allá. ¿De veras? ¿Para dónde? No, pa. ¿Y tú? Pues pa. It's a big story. It's a big story, man. And then we went to la panadería. Allá, por venir, went to la panadería. He said, ven, vamos a la panadería. He goes, pues, I don't know, tengo que escribir, Juan. I want to go to the panadería, Ben. We got to go to the panadería. So, but I need to write. I got ideas right now. Juan, are you listening to me, Juan? Yeah, but we go to la panadería. It's right over there. Okay, just 1 block away, Ben. Vamos allí. Allí mero, allí. So, órale, carnal. So we went to the panadería, and there was this really cool person there, a really cool dude. ¿Y ustedes qué quieren, pues? ¿La hacen o no la hacen? Aquí hay pan de todo. ¿No lo van a hacer o no lo van a hacer? Aquí tenemos bolillos. Teleras. En vez de teca telera. We got empanadas. No, he didn't talk like that. Tenemos empanadas. I kind of fell out of there. Tenemos empanadas. And then ¿y de qué tienen las empanadas? We got empanadas de chícharo. We got empanadas de clavos. Y tenemos empanadas de manteca. And empanadas. We got poems in empanadas, Ben. We got poems in empanadas. So then Ben bought a dozen, I bought a dozen, and it was a good day. And then Ben said, bueno, hermano, ¿para dónde le vas a dar? Pa. ¿Y tú para dónde le vas a dar? Pues pa, hermano. Ah, qué suave. Pues yo también. You go para allá, I go para allá. And we'll go have a taquito or something. And that's where the story ended. A big hand for our dear brother, Benjamín Alide. I discovered that I have family in this area. I discovered a while ago, not too long, 2010, that I had family in Mesquite. And one of my sobrinos is right here, Dan Aguilar Contreras, right over here. Dan, I hadn't met him my whole life, but there he is. And just the other day, I met my prima. Just today, I met my prima who lives in El Paso, Pilar Herrera, and she's right there in blue. And right there in the middle, pa está Roberto Robles, right over there, young man right there. A big man for everybody, and Tim and Dan, and our dean, the whole team. And Bobby, the whole team, gracias por todo. Y ya me voy para y ustedes se quedan para, okay?
Yesterday, I got a text from Tim Z. Hernandez. He said, "How much time does Juan Felipe have?" I said, "As much as he wants." Thank you, Juan. Benjamin Alida Saenz is the publisher of Blank Books. And I say blank because I have no idea how many books he has published. There has been so many of them. Same with, I remember one time I was introducing Juan and I was thinking, I lost count. Ben writes a lot of books. He's always writing. I even saw him taking out a pen and writing earlier, so I'm sure there's going to be a couple of poems or another story. He has won multiple awards, including the Wallace Stegner Fellowship in Poetry, the American Book Award, the Latin Poetry Foundation, and of course the PEN/Faulkner Award for Fiction, the very first Latinx writer to win that award, published by Cinco Puntos Press. But I think what we love most about Ben is how he dares to be beautiful. I mean, not many people have the ability to just be beautiful. And obviously, I'm not talking about physical beauty, although he is a good-looking man. But I'm talking about he just lets beauty out in his work, and he doesn't censor it. He doesn't stop it. He writes lines like, "You are thirst, and thirst is all I know." My God, who writes lines like that? Or this, "Try it again," I said. "Kiss me." "No," he said. "Kiss me." "No." And then he smiled. "You kiss me." I placed my hand on the back of his neck, and I pulled him toward me and kissed him. I kissed him, and I kissed him, and I kissed him, and I kissed him. I mean, maybe the poet Rumi was able to come that close to achieving love and beauty in his work, but that's one of the things I've always admired about Ben. And one of the things he told me, he says, if what you're writing doesn't hurt you, it's probably not worth much. And that was some of the best advice I'd ever received. It's a gift. It's a rare gift, the vulnerability, the passion, the poetry. I am honored to be here to introduce El Paso's greatest poet, Benjamin Alida Saenz.
Is this what it's like when you die and they go to and people go to the mass and someone says nice things about you and then they clap and you're dead? But it's nice to be alive. I'm 67 years old, and sometimes I say to myself, I'm 67 years old, and then I have some friends, really dear friends, that have just turned 70, and I think of that song by Simon and Garfunkel, "How terribly strange to be 70." And I don't think I don't know what we're supposed to feel like when we're 67, but it doesn't feel that bad, And I like being 67 because I've earned it, and you learn a lot of things. And I like that. It kind of sometimes it kind of pisses me off. They call Sammy and Juliana historical fiction because it's written in the 60s, and I'm thinking I call historical fiction something you have to do research on. But Chacon, I remember meeting Chacon when on the phone when he applied for a job at UTEP, and I'm really proud of the fact that I really helped get him here. I wasn't on the committee, and But, you know, I just was looking over the applicants. And there was this guy named Daniel Chacon. And I thought, he's perfect for the job. And he's not even being interviewed. And so I asked the chair, why aren't we interviewing Daniel Chacon? And he said, well, you know, he can't. We interview mostly at MLA, which is the Modern Language Association, which is the week between Christmas and New Year's. They have a big conference. And he said, we can't go to MLA to interview. And I said, why? Well, why not? And he says, because he's doing a writer's exchange in Cuba. And I said, oh, we really don't want him, do we? and it really pissed me off. And I went to the dean, and we had monies at the time for minorities, to hire minorities. And they gave some monies, and they set aside some money to hire Chacon. And of course, nobody was going to turn away you get a line. You know, in your department, you hardly ever get a new line, and we got a new line. So people like that, but they didn't necessarily like the way this happened. But interestingly enough, when Chacon came, they liked him more than they liked me. That's true at all. But, you know, I'm kind of a likable guy, but I'm not always likable. And I wasn't very likable to people because I was fighting for something that I believed in. And I made some enemies. And I always believe that you should earn your enemies. If people don't like you because you're a perfect asshole, well, then you're not earning your enemies. But if people don't like you because you're fighting for something that you really believe in, and they get uncomfortable, and that's okay with me. You know, I did have a tough time when I came to UTEP. I was the second Mexican American ever to be hired on a faculty of about 35 tenure track. And the other one was Teresa Melendez, who had been my teacher when I got a master's there. And then, so there was two people of color. And then Teresa fell in love with a junior faculty member and got married and left. And then there was me. And I didn't think that was right. I really didn't. And I thought that we had to fight for something. And I don't believe I would have been hired there because I got a master's there and went away and was at Stanford and got a Stegner Fellowship, which is very prestigious and all of that. I was they wanted to hire someone bilingual because we were going to start a bilingual MFA program in the future. And I was the only bilingual applicant. So they didn't have much choice, frankly. And I don't think my colleagues at the time liked that they didn't have much choice. But you know, it was worth the effort, actually. You know, I like a good fight. I do. To fight for the things that you believe in, that's a beautiful thing. I loved living here. I have always loved living here. And I took a job at UTEP not because of UTEP. It was my ticket to come back and live on the border. You know, and that's the truth. And I didn't spend a lot of time at UTEP sometimes because I knew people here, and I was really a part of this community. UTEP was where I worked. And sometimes I wasn't that engaged because I didn't feel I was wanted. But I wasn't going to be chased away either. And I stayed, and I have, and my mentors at Stanford said to me, don't take this job. You're not going to have much of a career if you take this job. And they all said to a person, you can't make a career writing about the border, which is precisely what I have done. You have to write about what you love. And while you're at it, you throw in things about what you hate. You know, my mom, you know, I'm really a lot like my mom, but but I have my father's great passion for cussing. And it's, you know, I love to cuss. I've always loved to cuss. And Dante says, his mother asked him, Dante, why do you love to cuss? And he says, because it's fun. And it is fun. And it's fun when you're a teenager, and it's fun when you're 67. You know? And it's an inexpensive kind of fun. I really have had a wonderful life and a wonderful career. And although I sometimes did my best to destroy myself, I managed not to succeed. And you know, I was always very big on the life of the mind, you know, to be an intellectual and to live the life of the mind. And I very much believe that intellectual to me is a holy word. But when it comes to writing, it's not your intellect that matters. It's your heart. A friend of mine asked me, he says, you have a lot of friends. Like, it's kind of like, really? Like, they're all your friends? And I said, well, I do have a lot of friends. They said, well, how many friends can you have? People say, you know how you have 3 or 4 good friends in your life, and that's it. And I think, well, who made that one up? And I said, well, how many friends can you have? Well, I got this from my mother. Well, how many friends can your heart hold? And my mother had a lot of friends. And she had a lot of friends. And she was great. My father, who was he wasn't a great father, but he was a good man. He had a lot of friends. You know, when I was surprised, you know, that the cathedral church in Las Cruces was packed, and they said, "Who are they here for? Was it my dad?" But you know, I loved my father, but it was a really, you know, kind of difficult love, and it was hard earned and it was well earned. And with my mom, it was like easy. And my father would get mad at me, and he'd say, "You're just like your mother." And I'm thinking, well, he's supposed to love her, you know. Like, you're just like your mother. And he says, you're supposed to want to be like your dad. You're a man. You're supposed to want to be like your father. And I didn't mean to insult him, but I said, you know, Dad, Mom's a nicer person. And he said, a man is not supposed to have to be nice, you know. You know, a man is like, and I thought, I did love my father, but it's my mom who taught me how to be a man. She did. And it's not that unusual. Because I was at a poetry conference once, and Joseph Yamanaka said the same thing. My mother taught me how to be a man. And I thought that was lovely. Because, you know, we learn a lot from women. A lot. And I love writing women characters. And it's not so difficult for me because I think, especially now that when I really embrace my sexuality, I think like, you know, sometimes I think there's a lot of woman in me. So when I, you know, say the joke that the only problem with being gay is that you have to date men. See, women get that joke. And, you know, and I like that about me, you know. You know, I think I see men the same way women see them. And I'll have to tell you something that men don't know that women know. Men are a lot of drama. If only they knew that. We could rid ourselves of a lot of toxic masculinity. I want to just... thank you so much. You know, I don't need to be thanked for doing what I was supposed to do with my life. This is a great town. You know, I travel everywhere, and I go to different cities in the United States, and I say, this is a great town. Could I live here? And I say to myself, oh, fuck, no. You know, I'm going home, you know. And by the way, I want to say a little story about Juan Felipe Herrera. The first time I met him, he was in El Paso, and we were going, there was a San Antonio Book Festival, and because his wife has family here, and he was boarding the plane, and I was reading a book on postmodern poetry, and he passed me on the way, and then he said, I knew that was you. We never met. I knew that was you, because, well, who else would be reading postmodern poetry but on the plane? And he's talked to me as if he'd like known me forever. And one of the things I appreciate about him is that a lot of people think that I'm a little crazy. Well, I like being around Juan Felipe Herrera because he's fucking crazy. And he's really a wonderful man, a wonderful man. And you know what he did for our community when he was named the Poet Laureate of the United States for 2 years? It was wonderful. We were thrilled to have you representing us, precisely because you were crazy. And lovely, and kind, and gifted. Very gifted. So I'm just going to end by reading a little section from Aristotle and Dante, which is, you know, the book that I love to hate. Because, you know, sometimes you say, like, oh, you wrote Aristotle and Dante. Oh, you wrote Aristotle and Dante. And I want to say, you know, I've written other books. You know, I have. But, you know, you can't begrudge a book that made you famous. You know, it's like, really, you can't. Because you sound like an ingrate. And I loved writing that book. And I have to tell you something about that book. When it was first published, the first week of its publication, it sold 11 books. Not very promising. Compared to the second book, which sold 13,000 books the first week. And so it was like, this book it took a long time for it to catch hold. And I'm proud of this book because it didn't become the book that it was through any machinations of a PR machine in a New York publishing house. It got famous because kids loved this book. And they said, and they would say things to, you know, from my Twitter, they would say things to their friends. If you don't read this book, I'm never going to talk to you again. They threatened each other. They loved this book. And they read it, and they loved this book. And they write me these incredible letters. They write me incredible letters about how this book changed their life and how it saved their lives. And of course, I did nothing of the sort. I didn't say that. They saved their own lives by being open to a book and what it says. And these letters are just like, and they're endless, and I still get them today. And they're wonderful, just really wonderful. But the letters that move me the most are men my age and older who say, they share those letters that I get, messages, they have two things in common. They say, I wish I'd have hid this book when I was growing up, to which I say ditto. And they also say, every one of them says, you healed the broken boy that lived inside of me. That breaks my heart. It does, because their lives have been so difficult in many ways. And their lives are so courageous. And to understand the courage of so many men and women who have fought just to say, for this nation and its people, to recognize that we're just human beings. And if I do anything in my books, I normalize being Latino because we're not the UFO people that exist, you know, we're not them. We're just people. And, you know, I read my books and I don't make a big deal out of it. They just are Latinos living their lives. And I normalize that. And I normalize being gay because for me it is normal. And it's not a big deal. You know, it's not a big deal. And so you just see them as people. And that's what I can do that. You know, I have never performed my own ethnicity on the page. And I have never performed my gayness on the page either. I write as a human being and as a man. You know, at this point in my life, I'm perfectly happy that I'm gay. It took me so long to embrace that. And now that I have, I like it. And I wouldn't be straight for all the money in the world. Just so you guys know. What's so special about being straight? You fucked up the world. Here. So I'm going to read you this one section. Oh, can I have some water? You know, one of the great things about being a writer is that, you know, when you present and stuff, you get up in front of people, and you know, I don't have one shy bone in my body, which is really, you know, it's really a good thing because I like people, and I like talking to them, and that's how I feel when I present in front of people, and I'm never afraid, but I'm never afraid to be myself either, and I think I'm not a persona. It's hard to be yourself all the time, you know, because, you know, sometimes during the pandemic, I look in the mirror and I look at the guy in the mirror and I'd say, get the fuck out of my house, I'm sick of you. But, you know, you can't really divorce yourself now, can you? And really, sometimes I say that's really too bad. So I took a deep breath and decided to make the call, the dreaded call. That's what I called it in my head. You know, there have been lots of things I've dreaded. Right before I met Dante, I dreaded waking up in the morning. That's some serious dreading. Cassandra was right. I owed it to Susie and Gina to tell them that I was gay. It was so fucking weird. I mean, I actually practiced saying that in the mirror. I look in the mirror and point at me in the mirror and say, Ari, you're gay. Now repeat after me, I'm gay. It was stupid, I know, but maybe it wasn't so stupid. And I wasn't normally the kind of guy who did silly things like that because I didn't particularly like silly, and I didn't even like the word. Dante said that every word deserved to be respected. I thought that was admirable, but sometimes we had too much respect for certain words, like the word fuck. I didn't particularly want to lose my respect for that word, or maybe I didn't have to respect that word in order to use it. I know which side of the argument my dad would take, and I didn't have to guess what my mother would think. I knew I was sitting around thinking all these things because I was delaying the dreaded call. Ari, you should tell them. Cassandra's voice in my head. Great, just great. Another voice living in my head. I looked up Susie's number in the phone book. I heard the phone ringing. And then I heard Susie's voice on the other end. Susie, this is Ari. Ari? Aristotle Mendoza is calling Susie Bird? Well, push me into the swimming pool wearing a wedding gown. Knock it off. This isn't such a big deal. I've known you since I was in first grade. Well, that's a good point. You have known me since we were in first grade. And not once have I ever heard your voice on the other end of the telephone line. And what's ever stopped you from picking up the phone? You, Ari. That's what stopped me. Oh, I think I'll give Ari a call. See what he's up to. Okay, I get it. And then the smartass in me kicked in and I said, so Susie, what have you been up to? Oh, nothing. I was just sitting around waiting for a phone call from my friend Ari, hoping against hope that today was the day that he would finally call. And then she started laughing, a little overly amused with herself. Susie, you're starting to piss me off. I wish I had a nickel for every time you said that to me. You want me to apologize for waiting 12 years to call you on the phone? Oh shit, I thought. I wasn't exactly making myself look good. I was thinking that maybe an apology might not be such a bad idea. There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. Ari, did you hear what you just said to me? Unfortunately, after I said it, I did hear it. And then I knew what the right thing to say was. I'm sorry, Susie. Being friends with people isn't my strong suit. And I haven't had a lot of practice. And I knew you and Gina weren't just bugging me, the shit out of me, for the fun of it. I wasn't invisible to you and Gina. And I liked being invisible. I wanted to be left alone, and you didn't accept that. And I'm glad, I am, that you and Gina took the time to see me. I knew it was coming. She was crying. I mean, that's what she did. Her tears were part of the way she lived in the world. I waited for her to stop crying. Your loneliness made me sad, Ari. And there's something about you. I mean, people are like countries. And me and Gina and your friend Dante, we're all countries. And maybe you've given your friend Dante a visa. But even if you have, that's just one person. And one person isn't enough. Having friends is like traveling. Gina and I have offered you a visa to travel to our countries whenever you want. So, Ari, when are you going to give us a visa? We want so much to visit you. We want so much for you to show us around your beautiful country. And she was crying again. Her tears used to bug me, but I was thinking that was really pretty sweet to be so sensitive. And then I said, well, that's exactly what I was calling about. I wanted to inform you that all the paperwork has been processed and your visa has been approved to enter into the country of Ari. But you're entering it at your own risk. I knew she was smiling, and it made me happy that I had made that phone call. It was hard, but change was a difficult thing, and I was starting to discover that change didn't just happen. I had to make it happen. Listen, I was going to ask you and Gina to come over for lunch today. I know it's sort of last-minute thing, and I know you're probably busy, and she stopped me right there. We'll be there, she said. Damn straight we'll be there. I wish she hadn't used that word. But you haven't talked to Gina yet. How do you know she's not busy? Believe me, she'll get unbusy. And then she paused and said, I don't mean to question your sincerity, Ari, but I can't help but feel that you're up to something. Well, maybe I am up to something, but it isn't anything nefarious. Nefarious, I love that word. I know you do. It was you who introduced me to that word. She laughed. 12 o'clock, you know where I live. I hung up the phone, and I noticed I was trembling. I didn't know what I was doing. The Ari I used to be would never behave like this. But the Ari I used to be was disappearing, though I knew he would leave parts of him behind. And the Ari I was becoming hadn't quite arrived just yet. I couldn't stop trembling. I was afraid. I didn't know how to go about any of this. For a moment, a kind of panic took over me, and I couldn't breathe. I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I took a deep breath, and then another, and then another. And I just kept telling myself that everything was going to be okay. I was doing the right thing. I didn't like placing my life in other people's hands. I didn't have anything to do with Cassandra or Susie or Gina, but deep down I already knew that my whole life was going to be in other people's hands. And I felt an anger in me, and then I felt myself trembling again, and I wondered if this was what the earth felt like during an earthquake. But then I thought, no, this is what a volcano feels like when it's about to explode. I felt dizzy, and I found myself retching whatever was left in my stomach into the toilet bowl. I don't know why, but I was crying, and I couldn't stop, and I didn't want to stop. And then I didn't feel anything, and I wanted to feel something. So I whispered Dante's name, and I started to feel something again. For an instant, I wanted to be someone else, or some other version of me. Another version of me, one who liked girls and feel what it was like to be a part of the world and not just living in its corners. But I was that guy. I wouldn't love Dante the way I loved him, And that love was the most painful and beautiful thing I had ever felt. And I never wanted to live without it. And I didn't give a shit that I was young, and I had just turned 17. And I didn't give a shit if anyone thought I was too young to feel the things that I felt. Too young? Tell that to my fucking heart. I'm gonna close with a poem, because I'm a poet, and I became a writer because I am a poet, and I loved, when I used to practice, when I was starting to write poetry, I used to practice listening to the rhythms of words, and I thought English is naturally iambic. So I would make up sentences that were perfectly, normal sentences that were an iambic pentameter. Things like, today I woke and then I walked the dog, is perfectly iambic pentameter. And I started to listening to the rhythms of words and what they sounded like. And it was wonderful. And I would look up words like ephemeral. When I was about maybe 11, or something like that, I read The Little Prince, and the word ephemeral was in there. And I didn't know what that word meant. But that sent me into getting addicted to looking words up in the dictionary. And it was fun, because then words became mine. Like Ari says, words were different when they lived inside of you. And they are. The words we use are the words we know. And they become ours. And words are given to us. I love the border, and I remember they translated one of my books, adult novels, Imperfect Life, into Spanish. And it was translated by Colombian poets, and it was a perfectly wonderful translation, except for it wasn't border Spanish. And it was set in Juarez and El Paso. But my editor said, the best Spanish is spoken by Colombians. And I said, who's my editor? I said, Renee, you're full of shit. What are you talking about? No, there is no universal Spanish. We speak it differently in different parts of the world, but it's Spanish. And if people think that the border Spanish isn't real Spanish, then they better start to think about what language is, because it's alive. It's alive because people use it, and we're creative with it. And it's ours. And we take it and make it ours. But I love being a poet, and I'm working on another book of poems. It's entitled In a Quieter Time That I Have Never Known. And I'm also decided that I'm going to write something that I never write, and that is a memoir. And it's going to be entitled Inexactitudes. Because I'm not going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell how I've experienced the world. And that's not about the truth. It's about how it feels to be me in different circumstances. And that's all, we don't know what things are. We just know experiences. It's like we don't know people. We have an experience of someone, and that's what we know, our experience of them. Whatever their truth is, it's not like, we can get at it. We just should enjoy the miracle of the experience of the people that we love. So this is called, it's from Dreaming the End of War, and it's the prologue. Do not mind the bomb, and we're at war again. Do not mind the bombs. In Belgium, I remember they called this day White Monday. Belgium was my home when I was learning words like God and doubt and faith. Belgium was my home when I entered the country called man. There, in that land, where I learned to fall in love with learning, winter always stayed and stayed. The days too dark, the rains incessant, pounding, and all the sleepers dreamed of sun and shirtless, shoeless days. I remember trains, leaves, trees, Remember, too, that aging, tired woman who told me why the trees grew straight and tall in rows in Belgium's rain-soaked earth. I remember what she said. The trees, we planted them in rows when the war was finally won. I pictured her young, a handsome husband at her side. At last, the war was done. At last, and before they planted crops, they planted trees. The trees the war had stolen from the earth. What the bombs had not destroyed, we chopped for fuel. Their stumps and branches gave us warmth. The land was bare and spent. The earth, it reeked of guns and blood and rotting flesh, and so we planted trees. And as we worked, we found reminders of that war. A rifle, empty shells, the remains of a man, a bullet through his chest, his uniform turning to dust. We called a priest and blessed the bones. A boy. I knew he'd been a boy. Belgian, English, French, bah, he was a boy. I cried that night, for all the world had lost. Then woke and finished planting. And through the years, we watched the growing trees. Before my mother died, she went from tree to tree, kissing leaves and branches. Have you gone mad? I yelled. And she screamed back, I am at last in love. She smelled of leaves and bark the night she breathed her last. The day I buried her, I leaned against a tree and wept. I swear, I smelled her breath as I leaned against that tree. Today, I hear that woman's voice as I read the morning news, the news of bombs, of all the deaths, Americans, Iraqis, children, women, men, dead like pie, the blood and bodies run into infinity. I walk outside. The sky as clear as simple boyhood words, Mama, Papa, Yaga. Oh, for a day when this would be my only task, to sit and memorize the blueness of a sky. Better now to study trees that grow on desert sands than study war. So I began to count the leaves on limbs of waking trees. I knew that wars are raging everywhere, even in my heart. Do not mind the bombs. Do not mind them, not today. I wander through my garden, examining the plants. I lost them to the freeze, but most survived. I touch and kiss the tender leaves and speak to them, half lost, half crazed, and half expecting trees and plants and shrubs to kiss me back. Perhaps today they'll kiss me back. I touch a desert bush, yellow, flowers bursting like a flame, spring's first blaze of light. The dog running up and down the yard, then rolling on the grass to scratch her back. I laugh and speak to her. The wars are everywhere. I'll plant something to survive the torture. Something to survive the torture of the sun. Something to withstand 1,000 years of drought. I touched a tree I planted years ago. I touched and touched. Oh, touch me back. Do not mind the bombs today. Kiss me. Kiss me back. Thank you so much.
We're not done yet, by the way. Please bear with me. As we've gone through the night, and I want to thank everyone for everything, and especially Ben. I've been reminded of something I once saw on the television. It was my boyhood hero, or one of them, Miles Davis, the great jazz trumpeter. And Miles was being given an award. I believe it was the National Medal of Freedom. And he was the first black jazz musician to receive the National Medal of Freedom. And of course, the television presenter came up to him and he said, "Mr. Davis, how does it feel to be the first black jazz musician to receive the Medal of Freedom?" And he said, "They should have done it a long time ago." and then the guy, of course, you know, as he would do, he says, "Well, you know, that's true, but better late than never, right?" And Miles said, "Nope, they should have done it a long time ago." And that's the way I feel tonight, Ben. They should have done it a long time ago. But now we've done it, and we have a little presentation, so please bear with me. As I said earlier, the notion behind tonight was to celebrate something and someone worth celebrating. And the something we celebrate tonight is the act of enabling people who are imprisoned, whether by walls and chains or by ignorance and public excoriation, to break through those bonds and be free. And the someone, of course, is Ben Sáenz. So tonight we're going to present an award to Ben, the first annual award of its kind from the College of Liberal Arts at UTEP, and probably or possibly the last and only award of its kind. That will be up to the next dean. It's appropriate that this award is named for a UTEP graduate who perhaps more than any graduate has lived up to the meaning of this award. Since coming to UTEP 4 years ago, I could not understand how we could celebrate the people we celebrate: rich businessmen, famous celebrities, respected judges and professionals. But to my knowledge, we have never named a building or a program or an award after someone who is perhaps the most deserving of our alumni. Ruben Salazar was born in Ciudad Juarez. He was brought across the border with his family as a child in 1929. He attended UTEP, then Texas Western College. He graduated in 1954 with a degree in journalism from UTEP, or from Texas Western. He worked for the El Paso Herald-Post, where he once posed as a vagrant to get arrested so that he could investigate the poor treatment of prisoners in El Paso jail. He worked for other newspapers, including the Los Angeles Times, where as foreign correspondent he covered the U.S. occupation of the Dominican Republic, the Vietnam War, and the 1968 Tlatelolco massacre in Mexico City. When Salazar returned to the U.S. in 1968, he focused on the Mexican-American community and the Chicano movement, writing about East Los Angeles, an area then as now largely ignored in the media. He became the first Chicano journalist to work in a large general circulation publication. Many of his pieces were critical of the Los Angeles government's treatment of Chicanos, particularly after he came into conflict with police during the East LA walkouts, high school walkouts by young students who were protesting the treatment of Latinos in the high schools. He also continued his resistance to the Vietnam War. Many people would say that Ruben Salazar invented Chicano journalism. In January 1970, Salazar left the Times to become news director for the Spanish-language television station KMEX in Los Angeles. And at KMEX, he investigated allegations of police officers planting evidence to implicate Chicanos in the July 1970 police shooting of 2 unarmed Mexican nationals. In February 1970, Salazar made his support for the Chicano movement particularly clear when he authored an article in the Los Angeles Times titled, "Who is a Chicano and what is it the Chicanos want?" On August 29, 1970, Salazar was covering the National Chicano Moratorium March, organized to protest the disproportionate number of Latinos who served in the Vietnam War. As the aftermath of the march was attacked by police and things became more violent, Ruben repaired to the Silver Dollar Bar for a respite. A sheriff's deputy fired a tear gas projectile through the entrance of the bar, hitting Ruben in the head and killing him instantly. So we want to celebrate Ruben Salazar And as Miles said, it should have been done a long time ago. A UTEP graduate, not for how he died, but for how he lived, and for the lessons he provided us all, and how we can dedicate our lives to raising the human spirit. So I'm delighted to present the inaugural, and hopefully not the only, Ruben Salazar Award for Outstanding Contribution to the Human Spirit to Benjamin Aguirre Sáenz.
I didn't tell you this, Ben, but I'm an artist and I created it. Go ahead and tell me where's this from.
No, this is two of our great artists, Ramon Cardenas and Christian Cardenas. And Ramon, they are Los Dos. People have seen their beautiful work. The Sister Cities mural, which is downtown near the border. And Ramon has given this. Ramon and Christian wanted to be here tonight, but they're in Mexico at an exhibition. So Carrie Doyle was also meant to present it tonight to Ben, but Carrie got sick yesterday and she couldn't come. She sends her regrets for not being here and not being able to present it. But it was a printing that we picked because it represents kind of diversity, not in the way that it's become this kind of, PC word, but diversity in its real meaning, and the meaning that I think, represents a lot of what Ben stands for and has written about. So we just wanted to present this nice print from Los Dos. We'll get you some help to carry it home. Yeah.
I'll take it home if you want and give it to you later.
There you go. As usual. So, thank you all for coming, and thank everyone for these wonderful things that have been said tonight. We have food, we have drink, so stick around. Ben, I think, is going to be in the back with his books, signing books and so on. So go talk to Ben, buy the books. And don't forget, before you go out, get your parking pass, which has been validated, so you don't have to pay. Okay, thanks everybody.